8 members. 1 stage. Countless injuries that never made it to the headlines. You think you know Stray Kids? You've watched them perform with flawless energy, hit every beat, nail every high note, but what you didn't see is the member who finished an entire concert with a torn ligament and never said a word about it until the staff noticed him limping backstage. What you didn't hear is the one who sat through a tattoo session so calmly that the artist literally asked, "Do you even have nerve endings?" And what about the member who dislocated something mid-performance and just pushed it back in and kept going like it was a Tuesday rehearsal? Pain is not just physical, it's psychological, it's cultural, it's deeply personal. Some people scream at a paper cut. Others bite down on a fractured bone and smile for the camera. Tonight, we're not talking about talent. We're not talking about vocals or dance or rap. We're ranking something raw, something primal, pain tolerance. The SKZ medical and training staff, the people who've watched these 8 men push their bodies to the absolute edge for years, finally gave their honest, no-filter assessment. The results? Shocking. The member at number 1 is not who most stays would guess. The member at number 8 surprised even his own group mates. So who crumbles first, and who stands like a wall when the pain hits? Who cries in silence, and who doesn't cry at all? Can you handle finding out that your bias might be at the bottom of this list? Stay locked in, because this ranking is about to change the way you see every single member of Stray Kids. Number 8. Lino. The cat-like reflexes that dodge pain before it even lands. And we're kicking off this list with a name that's going to raise some eyebrows, twist some faces, and probably start a whole debate in the comment section, Lino. Yes, that Lino. The man who looks like he was sculpted out of ice and unbothered energy. The member who radiates "nothing can touch me" on every stage, every variety show, every behind-the-scenes clip you've ever watched. But here's the thing that the SKZ medical team pointed out, and it's honestly kind of genius when you think about it. Lino doesn't have high pain tolerance. He has high pain avoidance. There's a massive difference, and most people confuse the two. See, Lino grew up as a backup dancer before he ever joined JYP Entertainment. He trained under some of the most physically demanding choreographers in the Korean entertainment industry, and the one thing every professional dancer learns before anything else is not how to endure pain, it's how to prevent it. His body mechanics are so refined, so calculated, that he instinctively adjusts his angles, his landings, his weight distribution in real time. The staff said that during rehearsals, Lino is the member who stretches the longest, warms up the most thoroughly, and cools down with a discipline that would make a sports physiotherapist proud. He doesn't just dance, he engineers every movement to minimize impact on his joints, his spine, his ankles. And that's beautiful, that's elite-level body intelligence. But when pain actually arrives, when there's no dodging it, no preventing it, that's where the ranking tells a different story. The medical team recalled multiple instances where Lino would react immediately and vocally to even minor treatments, things like deep tissue massage on sore calves, ice baths after intense schedules, or getting those small adhesive therapeutic patches removed from his skin. He's the member who flinches first during flu shots. He's the one who, according to his own group mates in various behind-the-scenes moments, will dramatically hiss and pull away when someone accidentally bumps a bruise. And this isn't a weakness. Let's get that absolutely clear right now. This is actually the most natural, most biologically healthy response a human body can have. Pain exists for a reason. It's your nervous system screaming, "Hey, something is wrong, pay attention, protect this area." Lino's body listens to that signal perfectly. His pain receptors fire, and he responds. He doesn't override it, he doesn't suppress it, he doesn't play tough. He feels it, he reacts, and he addresses it. The sports science staff noted that this is actually why Lino has one of the lowest chronic injury rates in the group. Think about that for a second. While other members might push through pain and accumulate damage over time, micro tears in muscles, stress fractures that go unnoticed, joint inflammation that builds silently, Lino's immediate response to pain means he catches problems early. He rests when something hurts. He speaks up when a move feels wrong on his body. He modifies choreography in practice when he senses something is off, even if it's just a slight twitch in his lower back. The medical team actually said, and I quote, "If every idol responded to pain the way Lino does, we'd have significantly fewer career-threatening injuries in this industry." That's not shade, that's a medical professional saying his approach is the smart one. But on a ranking of pure pain tolerance, meaning who can sit in discomfort the longest without reacting, who can take a hit and keep going without flinching, Lino sits at the bottom. Not because he's weak, never because he's weak. This is one of the most physically gifted idols in the fourth generation, a man whose body control is so precise that choreographers have called him the human animation. He's at number 8 because his body is hyper-responsive, hyper-aware, and hyper-protective. He feels everything at full volume, and he doesn't pretend otherwise. In a world where male idols are constantly pressured to hide pain, to perform through injury, to act like nothing hurts, Lino's honesty with his own body is quietly revolutionary. He just doesn't see the point in suffering when he can fix the problem instead. And honestly, that might be the most Lino thing ever: efficient, logical, unbothered by what anyone thinks, and always 3 steps ahead of everyone else, including pain itself. But now here's where it gets interesting, because the member coming up at number 7, they don't dodge pain. They feel every single bit of it, just like Lino. But instead of reacting outward, this member does something that the medical team found genuinely concerning. They go completely silent. Who could it be? Number 7. Hyunjin, the artist whose body speaks louder than his silence. Before anyone in this comment section even thinks about typing, Hyunjin deserves higher. Let me tell you exactly what the medical team said, and it's going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this man's relationship with pain. Hyunjin doesn't belong lower on this list because he can't handle pain. He's here because of how he processes it, and it's something the staff described as the most emotionally complex pain response they've ever observed in an idol. Most people either scream or suppress. Hyunjin does neither. He absorbs. And according to the medical team, that absorption has a cost. Let's rewind to understand why. Hyunjin grew up as someone who channeled every single emotion, joy, sadness, frustration, anger, fear, into physical expression. Dance wasn't just a skill he picked up, it was his emotional language long before he had the words to articulate what he was feeling. Multiple interviews over the years have shown us a Hyunjin who cries openly, who feels deeply, who lets his emotions exist on his face and in his body without shame. That emotional transparency is what makes him one of the most captivating performers of his generation. But it's also what makes his pain response uniquely complicated. The medical staff explained that when Hyunjin experiences physical pain, whether it's a rolled ankle during practice, muscle cramps from overexertion, or the aftermath of those insanely demanding performances where he throws his entire body weight into every movement, he doesn't verbalize it immediately. Instead, his face changes first. His eyes glass over. His jaw tightens. His breathing shifts. The staff said they've learned to read Hyunjin's pain because he doesn't announce it the way Lino does. With Lino, you hear it. With Hyunjin, you have to watch for it. And by the time he actually says something, he's usually already been dealing with it for a while. There was a widely discussed moment during a concert tour where Hyunjin's knee was visibly bothering him. Fans caught it on fan cams. The way he slightly favored one leg during certain drops. The way he adjusted his center of gravity during formations. But he finished the show. He bowed. He smiled. He waved. And it wasn't until backstage that the medical team discovered he'd been dancing on a knee that was swollen to nearly twice its normal size from fluid buildup. When they asked him why he didn't signal for help or at least modify the choreography, his answer was painfully simple. He said he didn't want to ruin the fans' experience. That answer tells you everything about where Hyunjin sits on this ranking. His pain tolerance isn't low in the traditional sense. Physically, his threshold is moderate. The staff rated his raw nerve response as average, meaning he feels pain at roughly the same intensity as most healthy adults his age. What drops him to number 7 is the emotional weight he attaches to physical pain. For Hyunjin, a muscle injury isn't just a muscle injury, it's a threat to his ability to express himself. A hand injury isn't just inconvenience, it affects his painting, his drawing, his art. A vocal strain isn't just medical, it's a wall between him and his fans. The medical team noticed that Hyunjin's recovery periods are often longer than expected, not because his body heals slowly, but because the psychological component of his pain amplifies the physical sensation. Sports medicine calls this pain catastrophizing, and before anyone takes that term negatively, it's an incredibly common phenomenon among artists, musicians, and elite performers whose identity is deeply tied to their physical capabilities. Hyunjin's brain doesn't just register, "This hurts." His brain registers, "This hurts, and if it doesn't stop, I can't dance, and if I can't dance, I can't be who I am." That layered processing makes every injury feel bigger, last longer, and cut deeper than it might for someone who has a more detached relationship with their body. The fascinating contrast here is that on stage, in the moment of performance, Hyunjin can override almost anything. Adrenaline, the crowd, the music, the emotional high of performing, all of it creates a temporary anesthesia that allows him to push through pain that would stop him dead in a rehearsal room. The staff called it performance-induced pain suppression, and they said Hyunjin has one of the most dramatic gaps between his pain response during shows versus during regular training. On stage, he's a warrior. In the treatment room the next morning, he's the member who grips the edge of the table during deep tissue work, who needs a moment before they can start on a particularly sore area, who asks, "Is this going to hurt?" before every single procedure, not because he's afraid, but because he needs to mentally prepare himself for the sensation. It's emotional armor. He has to brace his mind before his body can accept the pain. And there's something deeply human about that, something that resonates far beyond the idol industry. Hyunjin reminds us that pain isn't just nerves firing, it's meaning. It's context. It's what that pain represents in the story you're telling yourself about your own life. For an artist like Hyunjin, every injury is a chapter he didn't want written. And that emotional honesty, that refusal to separate his heart from his body, is exactly what makes him the performer that millions of people can't look away from. His pain is never just pain, it's poetry he didn't choose to write. But hold on, because the members sitting at number 6, they're the polar opposite of everything you just heard. No emotional processing. No silent absorption. This member treats pain like a joke, laughing through things that would make most people cry, but the medical team says that habit is hiding something the cameras have never caught. Number 6. Felix. The sunshine who laughs through the storm but fools nobody on the medical table. You hear that voice, deep as the ocean floor, warm as a fireplace in December, and your brain immediately files Felix under soft, gentle. The member who bakes brownies for everyone and calls stays his babies. And you'd be right. Lee Yongbok radiates comfort the way the sun radiates heat, effortlessly, constantly, without even trying. But what happens when that sunshine gets burned? What happens when the warmest person in the room is the one in pain? That's where Felix's ranking gets fascinating, because the medical team didn't place him at number 6 for the reason you're expecting. It's not that Felix can't handle pain. It's that Felix refuses to let pain exist without turning it into something lighter, and the staff says that defense mechanism has made him one of the hardest members to accurately assess. Here's the pattern they described, and once you hear it, you'll start noticing it in every single behind-the-scenes clip you've ever watched. Felix gets hurt. Maybe he lands wrong during practice. Maybe he tweaks his wrist, catching himself on the floor during a particularly aggressive dance break. Maybe his back locks up from the sheer physical toll of performing Stray Kids level choreography night after night on a body that, let's be honest, wasn't built like a tank. Felix has always been one of the leaner, lighter members, and his frame absorbs impact differently than someone like Changbin or Bang Chan. So the pain hits. And what does Felix do? He laughs. Not a nervous laugh, not a forced laugh, a genuine, bright, Felix-style laugh that immediately makes everyone around him relax. I'm fine, he says, waving his hand, flashing that smile that could probably end wars. The members relax. The staff exhales. The camera moves on. But the medical team? They stopped falling for it a long time ago. They told the assessment team that Felix's laughter in response to pain is one of the most consistent behavioral patterns they've tracked across his entire career at JYP Entertainment. It started during his trainee days, back when he was the Australian kid who'd been uprooted from Sydney at an age where most teenagers are worried about school dances and weekend plans. Felix arrived in Korea with limited Korean language skills, no existing friendships in the company, and an overwhelming pressure to prove that he belonged in a system designed to break people down before building them back up. Pain, physical, emotional, social, was constant. And the coping mechanism he developed was disarmingly simple. If you laugh, people worry less. If people worry less, you become less of a burden. If you're less of a burden, you get to stay. That survival strategy from his trainee era hardwired itself into Felix's nervous system so deeply that to this day, his first instinct when something hurts is to minimize it through humor and warmth. The medical staff shared that during routine physical therapy sessions, the kind every idol goes through after intense promotion periods, Felix is constantly cracking jokes, making small talk, complimenting the therapists, asking about their day. And at first glance, it looks like he's just being Felix. Being sweet. Being social. But the experienced staff members recognize the pattern. The more Felix talks during treatment, the more pain he's actually in. It's inverse communication. Silence from Felix means comfort. Chatter from Felix means he's managing something. One therapist recalled a session where Felix was getting deep work done on a chronic tension point in his lower back, an area that had been giving him problems for months, and he was so animated, so cheerful, so busy making everyone laugh, that a newer staff member genuinely thought he wasn't experiencing any discomfort at all. The senior therapist quietly told them afterward, that was one of the most painful sessions we've done on him. He does this every time. And that revelation sits at the core of Felix's number 6 placement. His raw pain threshold, the point at which his nerves register, this is painful, is actually slightly above average. The medical team confirmed that in controlled assessments, Felix's initial reaction to pain stimuli is delayed compared to members like Lee No or Hyunjin. He genuinely does feel pain a beat later than most. That's a physiological advantage, possibly linked to his naturally high endorphin baseline. Studies have shown that people with consistently positive emotional states often produce more natural painkillers in their system. And Felix's relentless optimism might literally be medicating him from the inside. But here's the catch. Once the pain does register, Felix's tolerance drops faster than his rankings suggest. The laughter, the jokes, the I'm okay routine, it's not evidence of tolerance. It's evidence of performance. He's not sitting in the pain and enduring it. He's actively trying to escape it by redirecting everyone's attention, including his own. The medical team compared it to a magician's misdirection. Look at the smile, not at the wince. Listen to the joke, not the sharp inhale. Watch the hand waving dismissively, not the other hand quietly pressing against the part that hurts. And the emotional layer underneath all of this is something that will resonate with anyone who's ever been the positive friend in their group. Felix carries an enormous, self-imposed responsibility to be the mood maker, the safe space, the person who makes everything feel okay. That role doesn't have an off switch. It doesn't pause when he's injured. It doesn't take a break when he's exhausted. When Felix is lying on a treatment table with his muscles screaming, some part of his brain is still calculating how to make the room feel lighter, because that's who he decided to be when he was a scared teenager in a foreign country. And he's never let go of that identity. The staff said the most honest glimpse of Felix's real pain tolerance comes in the very early morning hours after a concert, when the cameras are off, the fans are gone, the members are scattered in their own hotel rooms, and Felix is alone with the medical team for late-night treatment. In those moments, quiet, private, no audience to perform for Felix is different. The laughter fades. The jokes stop. He's still polite, still grateful, still impossibly kind. But he's honest. He'll quietly say, "This one really hurts," in a voice so small it barely sounds like the same person who was commanding a stage in front of 50,000 people hours earlier. And in those moments, the staff sees the real Felix, not weak, not fragile, but human. Beautifully, unapologetically human. A person who gave so much sunshine to the world that he forgot to save some warmth for his own wounds. Now, the member waiting at number 5 took the medical team completely off guard. Because this person's pain tolerance doesn't come from laughter or avoidance or emotional processing. It comes from something far more unexpected, pure, calculated stubbornness that borders on medically irrational. The staff has a word for it, and that word is terrifying. Number 5. I.N. The magne whose stubborn silence scares the staff more than any injury. Nobody expected this. Not the fans. Not the members. And honestly, not even the medical team themselves when they first started working with the group years ago. Because if you rewind to early Stray Kids, the trainee era, the survival show, the debut days, young Hyunjin was the baby. The adorable, brace-faced, bright-eyed youngest member who seemed like he needed protecting from the world. Every Hyung in that group instinctively shielded him. Every fan cooed over his innocence. The entire narrative around I.N was softness, was youth, was the little one who's still growing. And then he grew. And what grew with him was something the medical team didn't fully recognize until they'd been treating him for over 2 years, a pain tolerance built not on physical gifts, not on emotional detachment, not on laughter or tears, but on the most dangerously quiet force in human psychology, the refusal to be seen as the weak link. Let that sink in for a moment before we go any further. Every single member on this list so far has a pain response that's visible in some way. Lino flinches and vocalizes. Hyunjin's face transforms. Felix laughs and deflects. You can read them, even if it takes practice. I.N? The medical team said he gives them almost nothing. When Hyunjin is in pain, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't laugh it off. He doesn't let his expression shift. He just goes quiet. Not the kind of quiet that draws attention, not brooding, not dramatic, not the cinematic silence of someone clenching their jaw while a single tear rolls down their cheek. It's the mundane kind of quiet. The kind that looks like a person just lost in thought, maybe a little tired, maybe scrolling through his phone, maybe just being his usual calm self. And that's exactly what makes it terrifying to the people responsible for his health. The staff described multiple occasions where I.N completed entire schedules, rehearsals, recordings, fan events, performances, while nursing injuries that he simply never reported. One incident that particularly shook the medical team involved a hairline stress fracture in his foot that went undetected for weeks. Not because the medical team was negligent, they run regular assessments on all members, but because Hyunjin's behavioral indicators gave absolutely zero signal that anything was wrong. He didn't limp. He didn't favor the foot. He didn't ask for tape or padding or modified choreography. He adjusted his weight distribution so subtly, so gradually, that even the choreography directors, people whose literal job is to watch body movement with microscopic precision, didn't catch it. It was only discovered during a routine imaging scan that was scheduled for something else entirely. When the results came back showing the fracture, the medical team's first reaction wasn't concern for the injury itself. Hairline stress fractures in idols' feet are unfortunately common and very treatable. Their first reaction was alarm at how long he'd been hiding it. When they confronted him, gently, carefully, the way you approach someone you know is going to deflect, Hyunjin's response was almost maddeningly casual. He said he noticed it felt a little different a few weeks ago, but assumed it would go away on its own. Not, it hurt. Not, I was in pain. He used the word different. The medical team said that single word choice revealed everything about how I.N's mind categorizes physical discomfort. Where most people have a binary system, something either hurts or it doesn't, Hyunjin operates on a spectrum where pain has to reach a remarkably high threshold before his brain reclassifies it from different or uncomfortable to genuinely painful. And the roots of this are deeply tied to his position within Stray Kids. Being the magne of any K-pop group carries weight, but being the magne of Stray Kids, a group built on self-production, raw intensity, emotional honesty, and a reputation for being one of the most physically demanding performance groups in the industry, that carries a completely different kind of pressure. From the very beginning, Hyunjin watched his Hyungs push through exhaustion, perform through sickness, train through soreness. Bangchan pulling all-nighters in the studio despite being physically drained. Changbin hitting the gym and the practice room back to back until his muscles gave out. Hyunjin dancing until his feet bled during trainee evaluations. Han recording through vocal strain because the song needed to be finished. These weren't just stories Hyunjin heard, he lived alongside them. He watched. He absorbed. And somewhere deep in his developing psyche, a rule was written that he probably isn't even fully conscious of. If the Hyungs don't stop, I don't stop. If the Hyungs don't complain, I definitely don't complain. Because complaining means I'm not ready. Complaining means I'm still the baby. Complaining means maybe I don't belong at the same level as these people I admire more than anyone in the world. The medical team identified this as a textbook case of hierarchical pain suppression, a phenomenon documented in military studies, athletic teams, and high-pressure group environments where the youngest or newest members unconsciously raise their pain tolerance to match or exceed the perceived standard set by senior members. It's not that their nerves are different. It's that their brain literally intercepts pain signals and downgrades their priority because the psychological cost of showing pain, being seen as weak, as young, as not enough, outweighs the physical cost of enduring it. And here's the part that genuinely moved the medical team when they reflected on it. Hyunjin doesn't do this for attention. He doesn't do it for praise. He doesn't want anyone to say, wow, I.N is so tough. In fact, the last thing he wants is for anyone to notice at all. His silence isn't a performance. It's a promise he made to himself, probably before he even had the maturity to understand what he was promising, that he would carry his own weight, that he would never be the reason the group slowed down, that he would stand shoulder to shoulder with his Hyungs even if his body was begging him to sit. The staff said the most heartbreaking version of this plays out after particularly grueling concert nights, when the medical team does their rounds checking on each member. They get to Hyunjin's room, they ask how he's feeling, and he smiles, not Felix's deflective sunshine smile, but something quieter, almost grateful, like he's thankful someone even thought to check, and he says, I'm good, Hyung. Every time. Without fail. I'm good. Even when the thermal imaging scan they run shows inflammation patterns that suggest he is very much not good. Even when his cortisol levels indicate his body has been in a sustained stress response for hours. I'm good. 2 words. A closed door disguised as an open one. The youngest member of Stray Kids learned how to make pain invisible, and he learned it so well that sometimes the medical team wonders if he's made it invisible even to himself. That quiet, stubborn, unshakable refusal to be a burden, it's not just pain tolerance. It's love. A fierce, silent, slightly heartbreaking love for 7 people he'd rather hurt for than hurt in front of. But the member rising at number 4 brings an entirely different energy to this conversation. Where I.N hides his pain out of love, this next member confronts pain head on, not to prove anything, not to protect anyone, but because somewhere along the way, they genuinely stopped understanding why pain should be a reason to stop doing anything at all. The medical team called it a broken alarm system, and what they meant by that will leave you speechless. Number 4. Seungmin. The logical mind that deleted pain from his operating system. Forget everything the first 3 rankings taught you about pain, the flinching, the emotional weight, the laughter, the silence, because Kim Seungmin operates on a completely different frequency, and it's one that left the medical team genuinely scratching their heads for the longest time. With Lee No, they understood the biology. With Hyunjin, they understood the emotion. With Felix, they cracked the behavioral pattern. With I.N, they identified the psychological driver. But Seungmin? Seungmin took them months to figure out, because his pain response doesn't fit into any conventional category. It's not suppression. It's not avoidance. It's not performance. The closest word the staff could find, and they admitted it's imperfect, is dismissal. Pure, intellectual, almost robotic dismissal. Like his brain receives the pain signal, evaluates it against a checklist of things that actually matter, determines it doesn't qualify, and simply files it away in a folder labeled irrelevant. And before anyone mistakes this for coldness or lack of feeling, let me walk you through exactly how Seungmin arrived at this place, because the backstory is far more human than the surface suggests. Kim Seungmin joined JYP Entertainment through an open audition after being a fan of the company's artists, specifically Day6 Young K. And unlike several other members who came in with dance backgrounds or musical training or years of childhood preparation, Seungmin entered the system as something arguably more powerful, a student. An academic. A person whose entire worldview was structured around logic, preparation, methodology, and measurable progress. While other trainees attacked their weaknesses with raw emotion and adrenaline, Seungmin sat down and studied his weaknesses like they were exam subjects. Vocal technique wasn't passion, it was physics. Breath support, resonance placement, vowel modification, he approached singing the way an engineering student approaches thermodynamics. And that same analytical framework extended to every aspect of his idol life, including how he processes physical discomfort. The medical team described a moment during an early health assessment that first tipped them off to how uniquely Seungmin's mind handles pain. During a standard flexibility test, the kind where a therapist pushes a limb to the edge of its range of motion until the patient reports discomfort, most members respond with a gradual escalation. That's tight. Okay, that's uncomfortable. Yeah, that hurts. Stop. A normal, healthy, expected progression. Seungmin's response was different. The therapist kept pushing, waiting for the verbal cue to stop, and Seungmin just sat there, expression unchanged, watching his own leg being stretched with what the therapist described as curious detachment, like he was observing an experiment happening to someone else. When the therapist finally stopped out of caution and asked, "Did that hurt?" Seungmin thought about it for a moment, actually thought about it, like the question required genuine analysis, and said, "I think so." But it didn't seem important. That phrase, "it didn't seem important," became a running reference among the medical staff whenever Seungmin's name came up in pain tolerance discussions. Because that is his pain response in a nutshell. His nervous system registers pain. He's not numb. He's not physiologically different. The signals fire, they reach his brain, and his brain acknowledges them. But then his prefrontal cortex, the rational, decision-making, priority-setting command center, kicks in and essentially overrules the alarm. Pain is information to Seungmin, not an emergency. It's data. And like any good analyst, he triages data based on relevance. Is the pain indicating something structurally dangerous? Does it threaten his ability to perform his immediate responsibilities? Will ignoring it create a larger problem in the next 24 hours? If the answer to all three questions is no, Seungmin's brain effectively mutes the signal and moves on to the next task. The medical team saw this play out consistently across years of treatment. During comeback preparation, those notoriously brutal multi-week stretches where stray kids rehearse choreography for 8, 10, 12 hours a day while simultaneously recording music, filming content, and maintaining variety show schedules. Seungmin accumulates physical wear like every other member. Sore muscles. Stiff joints. The low-grade, whole-body ache that becomes ambient noise for any working idol. But while other members seek treatment proactively, request massage time, apply patches, or at minimum acknowledge the discomfort verbally to staff, Seungmin simply doesn't mention it. Not in I.N secretive, self-protective way, I.N hides pain deliberately, consciously choosing not to show it. Seungmin isn't hiding anything. He genuinely doesn't prioritize the information enough to bring it up. It's the difference between someone locking a door and someone simply never noticing the door exists. The staff shared a particularly revealing anecdote from a tour stop where Seungmin caught his hand on a piece of stage equipment during a transition, the kind of sharp, sudden impact that typically produces an immediate visible reaction from anyone. A staff member nearby winced just watching it happen. Seungmin glanced at his hand, noted what appeared to be a developing bruise, and went directly into the next song's position without any change in expression, energy, or performance quality. After the show, when the medical team examined his hand, they found significant bruising and mild swelling consistent with a contusion that most people would describe as really freaking painful. When they asked Seungmin to rate the pain on a standard 1 to 10 scale, he paused, that signature analytical pause, and said, maybe a 4. It's just pressure. It's not interesting. Not interesting. Pain, to Kim Seungmin, has to be interesting to warrant his attention. And the medical team noted that this isn't a cultivated toughness or a trained response. It appears to be genuinely how his brain is wired. Some people are born with a higher density of certain pain-modulating neurotransmitters. Some people's anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region that assigns emotional significance to pain, is simply less reactive. Seungmin likely falls into this category, and his naturally analytical personality amplifies the effect. His brain doesn't just receive pain signals with lower emotional urgency, it actively evaluates and deprioritizes them in real time. The result is someone who can sit through procedures that make other members tense, who can perform through discomfort that would distract most people, and who can sustain high physical output over long periods without the mental fatigue that usually accompanies chronic low-level pain. And the medical team was very clear about this, Seungmin's broken alarm system is a double-edged sword. The same mechanism that allows him to dismiss minor pain also means he's at risk of dismissing significant pain. A pulled muscle that feels like just tightness. A stress response that registers as just fatigue. A joint issue that seems like just stiffness. The medical team admitted they've had to develop a separate monitoring protocol specifically for Seungmin, one that relies less on his self-reporting and more on objective measurements like range of motion tests, imaging, and biomarkers, because they simply cannot trust his subjective pain assessments. He's not lying. He's not downplaying. His brain genuinely rates pain lower than it probably should, and the staff has learned to add 2 or 3 points to whatever number Seungmin gives them on that 1 to 10 scale. What makes this ranking emotionally resonant, though, is what it reveals about Seungmin's role within Stray Kids. In a group full of explosive emotions, raw vulnerability, dramatic intensity, and heart-on-sleeve expressiveness, Seungmin is the steady hand. The constant. The member who doesn't waver when the ground shakes. And that extends to pain. He is, quite literally, the member who doesn't flinch. Not because he's pretending. Not because he's performing strength. But because his brain looked at pain, ran the numbers, and concluded it wasn't worth the disruption. In a chaotic, demanding, relentless industry that throws physical suffering at idols like it's part of the job description, Seungmin simply opted out of the emotional experience of pain while still functioning within its physical reality. He didn't break the alarm system, he just permanently set it to silent mode. And the members know it. The staff said that during group treatments, when someone's looking for reassurance before a particularly uncomfortable procedure, they look at Seungmin. Not because he gives motivational speeches or holds anyone's hand, that's not his style. They look at him because he's already sitting there, calm, scrolling through baseball stats on his phone, completely unbothered, and somehow that energy is contagious. If Seungmin isn't worried, maybe it's fine. If Seungmin doesn't think it's worth reacting to, maybe it really isn't that bad. He's the placebo effect in human form, and the medical team said that his presence alone has measurably reduced anxiety-related pain amplification in other members during group sessions. Now, if Seungmin's analytical calm impressed you, the member at number 3 is going to hit different. Because this person doesn't dismiss pain with logic. They overwhelm it with something far more primal, far more physical. Number 3. Bang Chan, the leader who built his pain tolerance like architecture. Engineered. That was the word. Not natural. Not gifted. Not born with it. Engineered. And when the medical team chose that specific term to describe Bang Chan's relationship with pain, they weren't being casual, they were being precise. Because Christopher Bang didn't walk into JYP Entertainment at 13 years old with the pain tolerance he has today. He constructed it. Brick by brick. Year by year. Injury by injury. Across a trainee period so long, so grueling, so psychologically punishing that it would have broken most adults, let alone a teenager who'd been pulled from his comfortable life in Sydney, Australia, and dropped into one of the most competitive entertainment systems on the planet. 7 years. Most people hear that number and think about the time. The medical team thinks about what 7 years of continuous physical and emotional stress does to a human body's pain processing system, and in Bang Chan's case, what it built is something closer to a fortress than a person. Let's establish something critical that separates Chan from every member ranked below him on this list. Lino avoids pain. Hyunjin absorbs it emotionally. Felix masks it with warmth. N hides it out of love. Seungmin intellectually dismisses it. Bang Chan went to the gym and trained his body to produce its own countermeasures against pain until tolerating extreme discomfort became as automatic as breathing. This isn't metaphor. This is documented exercise physiology. The medical team explained that Bang Chan maintains one of the most rigorous personal fitness regimens they've ever seen in an idol, and it goes far beyond aesthetics or stage presence. His workout routines, which members and staff have referenced countless times over the years, those late-night gym sessions, those early morning runs, the weight training that sculpted a physique that looks like it belongs in a sports documentary rather than a music video. Those routines have fundamentally altered his neurochemistry. Consistent, intense physical training over years triggers a well-documented biological adaptation called exercise-induced hypoalgesia. In plain language, people who regularly push their bodies to physical extremes develop a higher baseline of endorphins, enkephalins, and endocannabinoids, the body's natural painkillers. Their nervous system literally recalibrates what painful means because it's been exposed to controlled discomfort so frequently that the threshold keeps rising. Bang Chan didn't just get stronger over 7 years of training. He got harder to hurt. And the medical team tracked this progression with a kind of clinical fascination, because Chan's case represents one of the clearest examples they've observed of someone deliberately, even if unconsciously, engineering their own pain tolerance through lifestyle choices. But here's where the ranking reveals something deeper than biology, something that transforms this from a medical case study into a story about the cost of leadership. The medical staff noted that Bang Chan's pain tolerance isn't distributed evenly across all types of pain. For acute, sudden, impact-based pain, a hit, a fall, a collision during an intense performance, the kind of sharp, immediate sensation that catches you off guard, Chan's response is remarkably controlled. His body absorbs shock the way a well-built structure absorbs an earthquake. There's movement, there's impact, but the foundation holds. During concerts, the staff has watched Chan take hits that would send other performers to the ground, accidental elbows during group choreography, equipment contact during complex stage transitions. The sheer blunt force of throwing his own body into performances with the intensity of someone who treats every show like it's the last one. He takes the hit. His expression barely shifts. He adjusts. He continues. The endorphin fortress does its job. But chronic pain, the slow, grinding, cumulative kind that doesn't come from a single moment, but from years of insufficient sleep, relentless work schedules, emotional weight, and the specific burden of being the person responsible for 7 other people's well-being, that's where the medical team saw something that worried them. Bang Chan's relationship with chronic pain isn't tolerance. It's coexistence. He doesn't overcome it. He doesn't dismiss it like Seungmin. He doesn't hide it like IN. He lives with it, in a constant state of managed discomfort that has become so normalized he no longer recognizes it as abnormal. The staff described a routine checkup where they asked Chan about his sleep quality, his muscle soreness, his stress levels, his general physical comfort. His answers were calm, measured, leader-like, yeah, my shoulders are a bit tight. Sleep's been okay, maybe 5 hours. My lower back acts up sometimes, but it's manageable. On paper, normal. Nothing alarming. But when the medical team cross-referenced his subjective self-assessment with the objective data, the tension mapping that showed his trapezius muscles locked in a state of chronic hypertonicity, the cortisol panels indicating sustained stress hormone elevation consistent with someone running on fumes, the spinal assessment revealing compression patterns typically seen in people a decade older. The gap between what Bang Chan reported and what his body was actually experiencing was staggering. He wasn't lying. He wasn't minimizing. He genuinely did not register those conditions as painful anymore. His body had been living in that state for so long that his nervous system reclassified chronic pain as his default setting. The medical team called it baseline drift, a phenomenon where prolonged exposure to discomfort causes the brain to gradually shift its definition of normal until conditions that would be clearly painful to a fresh body feel like just existing. Chan's fine is most people's "I need to see a doctor." His a bit tight is most people's "I can barely turn my head." His manageable is most people's "I haven't slept properly in weeks and everything hurts." And the roots of this baseline drift trace directly back to his role as leader. From the moment Stray Kids was formed, Bang Chan assumed a weight that no amount of physical training could fully prepare him for. He became the producer who stayed up until dawn perfecting tracks while his body begged for rest. The leader who checked on every member's mental state while neglecting his own. The eldest figure in the room who absorbed conflicts, managed crises, made impossible decisions, and showed up the next morning smiling like none of it happened. Pain, physical, emotional, psychological, became ambient noise in the life of someone who decided that his own suffering would always rank below his responsibilities. The medical team shared something that genuinely moved them. During a particularly intense tour stretch, back-to-back shows across multiple cities, minimal recovery days, the kind of schedule that grinds even the fittest bodies into dust, every member was showing signs of wear. The staff was adjusting treatments, modifying warm-ups, negotiating with management for lighter rehearsal loads. When they got to Bang Chan, he was in the treatment room, already icing his own shoulder with the quiet efficiency of someone who's done it 1,000 times, and the first thing he asked wasn't about himself. He asked, "How's Hyunjin's foot doing? And can you check on Felix's back before tomorrow?" The medic paused and said, "Chan, we're here for you right now." And Chan looked genuinely confused for a moment, like the concept of medical attention existing specifically for him, without it being redirected to someone else's needs, was foreign. That moment crystallized everything about his number 3 placement. Bang Chan's pain tolerance is extraordinary. It's engineered through years of physical conditioning, reinforced by neurochemical adaptations, and sustained by a psychological framework that prioritizes everyone else's comfort above his own. He can take almost anything, and he has for years, silently, relentlessly, without complaint. But the reason he's not number 1 isn't about biology or threshold or toughness. It's because the 2 members above him possess something that even Bang Chan's fortress can't replicate, and when the medical team described what separates number 2 from the rest of this list, the room went quiet. Because this next member doesn't engineer pain tolerance. They don't train for it. Number 2, Changbin, the powerhouse born with a body that treats pain like background music. Stop. Whatever you think you know about Changbin's toughness, the muscle, the gym videos, the raw explosive power that turns every stage into a controlled demolition, set it aside. Because the medical team isn't ranking him at number 2 for the reasons the internet assumes. This isn't about how much Changbin can bench press. This isn't about the veins in his forearms or the fact that his body looks like it was carved from reinforced concrete. Every fan sees the exterior and draws the obvious conclusion. Of course Changbin has high pain tolerance, look at him. But the staff said the exterior is actually the least interesting part of the story. What earned Changbin this position, what separated him from Bang Chan above him, and left the medical team reaching for textbooks and outside consultations, is something invisible, something neurological, something he didn't earn through training or discipline or willpower. Changbin appears to have been born with a genuinely atypical pain processing system, and the staff realized it not through any dramatic injury moment, but through an accumulation of small observations over years that eventually formed a pattern too consistent to ignore. It started with the little things. Adhesive bandage removal, that sharp, stinging pull of medical tape off skin that makes virtually everyone wince at least slightly. Changbin showed zero response. Not controlled response. Not suppressed response. 0. The staff initially assumed he was just being tough, performing masculinity the way a lot of male idols do in front of medical professionals. But then they noticed the same non-reaction during blood draws. During deep tissue manipulation on areas that typically produce involuntary muscle guarding in even the most stoic patients. During therapeutic dry needling, a technique where thin needles are inserted directly into muscle trigger points, a procedure that ranges from deeply uncomfortable to genuinely painful for the vast majority of patients. Changbin's response to dry needling, according to the therapist who performed it, was to look mildly curious, ask what the needle was doing physiologically, and then return to watching a video on his phone. Not gritting through it. Not breathing through it. Not deploying any of the coping mechanisms that high-tolerance individuals typically use. He just wasn't bothered. The medical team started paying closer attention after that. They began documenting Changbin's responses to various pain stimuli with the kind of methodical precision usually reserved for clinical studies, and what emerged was a profile that didn't match any of the other members, or most patients they'd ever treated. Changbin's pain detection threshold, the point at which stimuli transitions from sensation to pain, tested significantly higher than average. Meaning the volume has to be turned up much louder before his brain even classifies the input as pain rather than just pressure or sensation. But here's where it gets truly unusual and where the staff felt they needed outside perspective. Once Changbin does register something as painful, his emotional and behavioral response to that pain is remarkably flat. Not absent. The team was clear about this distinction, but flat. Proportionally muted compared to the stimulus intensity. Something that a normal patient rates as a 7 out of 10, Changbin consistently rates as a 3 or 4, and unlike Seungmin, whose low ratings stem from intellectual dismissal, Changbin's low ratings appear to genuinely reflect his subjective experience. He isn't deciding the pain doesn't matter. He honestly isn't feeling it at the intensity that most humans would. The outside specialist the medical team consulted suggested that Changbin may have a naturally elevated endogenous opioid response, meaning his body produces higher than average levels of its own pain-killing chemicals at baseline. Not just during exercise like Bang Chan, but all the time. Some people are simply wired this way. It's a genetic and neurochemical variation, not unlike how some people are naturally more sensitive to caffeine or naturally require less sleep. Changbin's nervous system appears to come equipped with a built-in dampening system that intercepts pain signals before they reach full intensity in his conscious experience. And the implications of this for his career as an idol, specifically as a Stray Kids member, are enormous. Consider what Changbin does on stage. His performance style is arguably the most physically aggressive in the group. When Changbin raps, his entire body becomes a percussive instrument. He drops, he slams, he throws himself into movements with a force-to-body-weight ratio that would concern an orthopedic surgeon. His knees hit the stage. His hands strike surfaces. His neck whips with a velocity that generates forces most performers instinctively protect against. And he does this performance after performance, tour stop after tour stop, year after year, with an injury rate that, given his style, should be statistically much higher than it actually is. The medical team attributed this partially to his physical conditioning, which is elite level and undeniable, but primarily to the fact that Changbin's body simply doesn't send him the warning signals that would cause other performers to instinctively pull back. Most dancers develop a subconscious protective reflex over time. Their body learns which movements risk injury and subtly softens the execution to reduce impact. Changbin's dampened pain response means that reflex is weaker in him. His body doesn't scream, stop, the way it should, which allows him to commit fully to movements that other bodies would self-limit. The result is performances of unparalleled raw power, but also a risk profile that keeps the medical team permanently on alert. Because here's the paradox that sits at the heart of Changbin's number 2 ranking, and it's the same paradox that haunts Seungmin's placement, but amplified to a much higher degree. A body that doesn't adequately report pain is a body that can sustain serious damage without the person knowing. The medical team shared an incident that perfectly encapsulates both the marvel and the terror of Changbin's pain tolerance. During an intensely physical rehearsal period, Changbin developed what turned out to be a significant muscular strain in his shoulder, the kind of injury that, in most people, would produce immediate, obvious, movement-limiting pain. Changbin noticed his range of motion felt slightly restricted, but attributed it to needing to stretch more. He continued rehearsing at full intensity for 3 additional days before the medical team caught it during a scheduled checkup. The imaging revealed damage that the attending physician said should have been clearly painful to the point of dysfunction at least 48 hours before it was detected. When they showed Changbin the results and explained the severity, his reaction was a calm, slightly sheepish, "Oh. Yeah, I guess it has been feeling kind of weird." Kind of weird. A muscular strain that would have had Lee No immediately requesting treatment, that would have transformed Hyunjin's face into a map of discomfort, that would have sent I.N into his quiet endurance mode, registered to Changbin as kind of weird. The staff implemented mandatory enhanced screening protocols for Changbin after that incident, not because they don't trust him, but because they learned they fundamentally cannot rely on his self-reporting for injury detection. His internal alarm system doesn't ring at normal volumes. What should be a fire alarm comes through as a polite notification, easy to dismiss, easy to ignore, easy to push past until real damage is done. And yet, for all the clinical fascination and medical concern, there's something undeniably awe-inspiring about watching Changbin exist inside his own body. During fan events where members play physical challenge games, the slapping games, the flicking penalties, the ice-holding challenges, Changbin sits there like a monument while other members crumble around him. Not performing toughness. Not grinning through it. Just genuinely, authentically unbothered in a way that makes the other members look at him with a mixture of admiration and genuine bewilderment. Han once said during a live broadcast, looking at Changbin after a pain-related game with pure disbelief on his face, "Are you even human?" And honestly, watching the medical data, hearing the staff's assessment, understanding the neurochemistry behind that calm, unbothered demeanor, the answer to Han's question is, yes, he's human. Number 1. Han, the anxiety-riddled genius whose pain tolerance broke every scale the medical team had. Read that title again. Read it slowly. Let every word register. Because if there's a single revelation on this entire list that will fundamentally rewire how you perceive a member of Stray Kids, it's this one. Han Ji-sung, the member who has openly, bravely, repeatedly told the world about his anxiety disorder. The member who has had panic attacks on camera. The member who stepped back from live schedules because his mind was at war with itself. The member whose hands shake before performances, whose chest tightens in crowds, whose brain manufactures catastrophe out of silence. That Han Ji-sung has the highest pain tolerance in Stray Kids. And the medical team didn't just rank him number 1 by a narrow margin. They said it wasn't even close. The gap between Han and the rest of this list, including Changbin, including Bang Chan, including every member you've heard about tonight, is not a step. It's a canyon. And the reason behind it is so layered, so counterintuitive, so deeply tied to the very thing most people consider his greatest vulnerability, that when the staff explained it, the room went completely silent. Here's what you need to understand first, because without this foundation, nothing about Han's ranking will make sense. Anxiety and pain tolerance are not opposites. The general public assumes that someone who is emotionally sensitive, who experiences panic, who lives with a hyperactive threat detection system in their brain, must also be more sensitive to physical pain. It's an intuitive assumption. It feels logical. And it is completely, categorically, scientifically wrong, at least in Han's case. The medical team explained a phenomenon that has been documented in clinical research, but is rarely discussed outside of specialized pain science literature. Chronic anxiety can, in certain neurological profiles, actually elevate pain tolerance to extraordinary levels. The mechanism works like this. A person living with persistent anxiety exists in a state of near constant physiological arousal. Their sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, is perpetually activated at a low to moderate level. Heart rate slightly elevated. Stress hormones consistently circulating. Muscles carrying baseline tension. Neural pathways primed for threat. In most people, this chronic arousal leads to heightened pain sensitivity because the nervous system is already on edge, already interpreting everything as potentially dangerous. But in a specific subset of individuals, and Han appears to be one of them, the brain adapts to chronic arousal by developing an extraordinarily powerful top-down pain modulation system. Essentially, because Han's brain has spent years managing a constant internal emergency, the anxiety, the panic, the relentless mental noise, it has become so skilled at regulating overwhelming sensory input that physical pain, by comparison, barely registers as a priority. His brain is already dealing with a 5-alarm fire every single day. A burn? A fracture? A torn muscle? That's background static compared to the neurological hurricane he navigates just by existing. The medical team compared it to an air traffic controller who manages 100 flights simultaneously during a thunderstorm. You could set off a car alarm in the parking lot outside, and they wouldn't even hear it. Their attention, their processing power, their entire cognitive bandwidth is already allocated. That's Han's brain. Physical pain arrives, knocks on the door, and there's simply no one available to answer it because every resource is already deployed managing something the outside world can't see. And the clinical evidence the staff accumulated over years of treating Han isn't just impressive, it's genuinely unprecedented in their professional experience. They described a specific protocol they use across all JYP artists, a standardized pain response assessment that includes thermal sensitivity, pressure threshold testing, and sustained discomfort tolerance. Every idol takes it. Every idol produces results that fall within a predictable range. Han's results, the first time they administered the assessment, were so far outside that range that the attending physician initially assumed the equipment was malfunctioning. They recalibrated. They retested. The results were the same. Han's sustained discomfort tolerance, the measure of how long a person can endure a continuously painful stimulus before requesting it to stop, was more than double the group average. Not double the lowest member. Double the group average, which already includes high-tolerance members like Changbin and Bang Chan. The physician told the assessment team, "I've administered this protocol to hundreds of patients. Athletes, military personnel, chronic pain patients who've lived with daily agony for years. I have never recorded a number like this from someone his age. But cold clinical data, as staggering as it is, doesn't capture what makes Han's #1 ranking so profoundly moving. For that, you need to hear the stories." The medical team shared, with careful discretion, respecting privacy while conveying the essence, several incidents across Han's career that collectively paint a portrait of pain tolerance so extreme it borders on the inexplicable. There was the performance, and long-time stays may remember the period, though the specific details were never publicly disclosed, where Han completed a full concert set while dealing with an acute internal condition that the medical team later classified as requiring immediate clinical attention. Not a bruise. Not a muscle strain. Not the kind of surface-level injury that adrenaline can mask. A genuine, systemic, visceral pain event that the attending staff said should have produced visible distress signals in any normal patient. Han performed. Full choreography. Full vocal delivery. Full energy. Full facial expression, not the pained mask of someone fighting through agony, but genuine, readable, emotionally connected performance. The members on stage with him had no idea. The dancers around him had no idea. The 50,000 people in the audience had no idea. The medical staff monitoring via the backstage feed had no idea until Han walked off stage, found the medical room, sat down, and said calmly, quietly, almost apologetically, "I think something might be wrong." When they examined him and realized the severity of what he'd just performed through, the lead physician's response was not professional admiration. It was something closer to horror. Not horror at the injury, horror at the realization that a human being had just sustained that level of pain for over 90 minutes and produced zero external indicators. They asked him, afterward, why he didn't signal for help. Why he didn't modify his performance. Why he didn't at least tell someone. And Han's answer was so simple, so characteristically Han, that the medical staff member recounting it had to pause before continuing. He said, "I didn't want to worry anyone. And honestly, I felt worse from my anxiety. At least this pain made sense. At least I knew where it was coming from. Let that answer settle into your bones. I felt worse from my anxiety." The member with the highest pain tolerance in Stray Kids isn't tough despite his anxiety. He's tough because of it. Because when you've spent years navigating a condition that produces unbearable sensations with no visible cause, no clear location, no logical explanation, when your own brain can generate chest-crushing, breath-stealing, reality-distorting agony out of absolutely nothing, then a broken bone is almost a relief. So there it is, the complete ranking, the full picture, the truth behind 8 men who step onto stages around the world carrying pain you never see, fighting battles you never hear about, and performing at a level that makes it all look effortless. But here's what this list really taught us, beyond the rankings, beyond the numbers, beyond who's number 1 and who's number 8. Pain tolerance isn't about toughness. It never was. Lino isn't weak for flinching, he's wise. Hyunjin isn't fragile for feeling deeply, he's human. Felix isn't fake for laughing, he's protecting the people he loves. I.N isn't foolish for hiding, he's growing into someone who'll learn to ask for help. Seungmin isn't cold for dismissing, he's efficient. Bangchan isn't invincible for enduring, he's sacrificing. Changbin isn't superhuman for not feeling, he's wired differently. And Han isn't brave for surviving, he simply refuses to let the loudest pain in the room be the one that defines him. 8 members. 8 completely different relationships with pain. And every single one of them is valid. If this video changed how you see Stray Kids, even just one member, then hit that subscribe button, drop a comment telling us which ranking shocked you the most, and share this with a stay who needs to hear it. Because the next time you watch them perform, smiling, powerful, unstoppable, you'll know what's underneath. And you'll never watch the same way again. This has been your deep dive. Stay curious. Stay kind. And we'll see you in the next one. Clapperboard.